In the humid darkness above southern Brazil, witnesses described a low, silent shape crossing the sky and then a strange aftermath on the ground. Before long, Varginha would become one of the most discussed creature and crash mysteries in modern ufology. Varginha sits in Minas Gerais, far from the classic desert crash landscapes people imagine, yet close enough to busy roads, farms, and military routes to make every rumor spread fast. In January 1996, that ordinary setting became the center of an extraordinary story. The case begins with a night sky report. Several young women claimed they saw a cigar-shaped object moving oddly over the city. Their description was unsettlingly specific, and it set off a chain of events that still resists a clean ending. By the next day, other witnesses said something had come down nearby, and talk of a damaged craft started moving through Varginha faster than any official explanation. In cases like this, the first hours often matter most, because memory and rumor begin to braid together immediately. What made the story endure was not just a light in the sky, but the creature claims that followed. Residents reported seeing a small, unusual being with a large head and reddish skin, and that image lodged itself into the public imagination. Those descriptions were never uniform, and that matters. Some accounts emphasized fear and confusion, while others focused on a fragile, almost injured presence, as if whatever was seen had already been through something violent in the air or on the ground. The setting itself helps explain why the case spread so quickly. Varginha was a connected city, with police, hospitals, military presence, and local media all close enough to feed one another's attention within hours. Soon, investigators and journalists were trying to separate direct observation from secondhand retelling. That distinction is difficult here because the case is built from a mosaic of witness statements, official contacts, and later reconstructions. One of the most compelling details is the reported behavior of the object itself. Witnesses did not describe a dramatic explosion or a blazing descent, but a controlled, low movement that suggested something under power, or at least still guided. That kind of motion keeps the case alive because it does not fit the easiest crash narrative. If something failed, why did it seem so deliberate in the air? And why did the ground story become stranger after that? Another detail that drew attention was the reported military response. Local accounts described unusual movement by authorities, and that alone can transform a rumor into a national mystery when people feel something important is being handled out of sight. Supporters of the case point to the speed with which the story was contained, redirected, and argued over. Even without a single perfect document, the overlapping accounts create the impression that something unusual was being managed quickly. The creature reports remain the most difficult part to forget. People described a being that seemed unlike local wildlife, unlike a person, and unlike the familiar shapes the mind reaches for when it tries to explain a shock. That is why the Varginha incident became more than a local tale. It combined sky activity, a possible landing or crash, and a humanoid form that made the event feel as if two mysteries had collided at once. Researchers later traced interviews, timelines, and the geography of the reported sightings, trying to build a sequence from fragments. The result was never simple, but it did reveal a case with enough consistency to keep serious curiosity alive. A key question is whether the creature accounts came from one event or several. In a town buzzing with fear and rumor, even a small number of ambiguous sightings can multiply into a larger legend, yet the core descriptions kept returning. That repetition is what makes the case hard to dismiss outright. The story did not survive because it was dramatic. It survived because different people kept circling the same unsettling shape, the same timing, and the same sense of official unease. Still, the strongest evidence is also the hardest to verify cleanly. Much of what survives is testimony, and testimony can be powerful without being perfect, especially when it comes from frightened people trying to describe the unfamiliar in real time. That leaves room for ordinary explanations. Misidentification, rumor escalation, a misunderstood animal, or a local event later wrapped in extraordinary language. Those possibilities deserve attention because they are the first tools of any serious investigation. Yet even the grounded explanations do not fully erase the emotional force of the case. Something about the sequence of sightings, the reported response, and the creature descriptions continues to feel larger than a simple mistake. Part of the lasting power comes from the human setting. This was not a remote wilderness legend. It was a modern Brazilian city with witnesses, institutions, roads, and enough daylight to make the strange feel even stranger. And because the case sits at the intersection of crash law and creature law, it invites a bigger question. If something non-human entered our world, would it look like a shining craft first, or a vulnerable body left behind? That question is why believers continue to return to Varginha. They see in it a rare convergence of witnesses, timing, and aftermath that hints at contact, not just confusion in the sky. Skeptical readings remain possible, of course, and some details may have been amplified by repetition, media pressure, or the natural human urge to connect loose ends. But even those readings leave a residue of uncertainty that is hard to shake. The unanswered questions are the ones that keep the case alive. What exactly was seen in the sky? What was reported on the ground? And why did so many people remember the event as if something had briefly slipped through the ordinary world? Even now, the story resists closure because it contains both hard edges and soft ones. There are dates, places, and witnesses, but also gaps, contradictions, and the lingering sense that the most important moment was never fully captured. That is often how the strongest mysteries survive, not by proving one impossible answer, but by refusing to sit neatly inside the ordinary. Varginha remains one of those cases where the atmosphere of the event feels almost as important as the facts themselves. If there was a crash, then the trail was managed with unusual speed. If there was a creature, then the descriptions point towards something witnesses were not prepared to name. Either way, the incident leaves a shape in memory that has not faded. The most compelling possibility is not certainty, but contact with something unfamiliar that briefly crossed into a very ordinary place. Whether that something was misread, concealed, or truly extraordinary is still where the story opens. In the end, the Varginha incident endures because it offers no easy comfort. It leaves us with witnesses who believed they saw something impossible, and with a town that still feels marked by the question of what came down there. Maybe the answer is buried in human error, local rumor, and the distortions of memory. Or maybe, just maybe, Varginha was one of those rare nights when the sky answered back, and only part of the answer was ever found. What happened in Varginha remains suspended between testimony and explanation, between the seen and the understood. And until every fragment is accounted for, the incident will keep its place among the great unresolved encounters.